Hello, my name's Jade and today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book Freakout tag. I've done this video twice before, I think now. I don't think I did it last year. But it's such a classic on YouTube. I'm going to link the creators of this tag down below. And it just is a fun thing to do, to check up on your reading halfway through the year. Question number 1 is the best book you've read so far this year. I always struggle with this question. It's so hard to decide. I feel like I read quite a few potential new favourites. Quite a few in the beginning of the year and quite a few recently. Books that really stood out to me that may be new favourites but I'm not really sure yet. The very first one that came to mind was Fight Night by Miriam Toews. And actually another book that I was considering was another Miriam Toews book that I read earlier this year. I just had so much fun with this. I thought it was so clever. I thought it was so well written. I was obsessed while reading it. I couldn't put it down. Normally I'll read like a couple books at a time. But while I was reading this, it's all I could think about. It is all I wanted to concentrate on. It's that beautiful thing where I genuinely enjoyed the reading experience so much and I had so much fun and I felt so emotional and connected to it while reading it. But also, like, objectively, I think it's really clever. I think it discusses a lot of really interesting and important themes. It's one of those books that talks about like what it's like to be human, and I love those kinds of books. Following Swiv, we never know her age, but she's a kid. We know that much. And she lives with her pregnant mother and her grandmother. Her dad has taken off and left. And so it's just like the 3 generations in the house. Her mom is like somewhat stressed out because she's pregnant and she's trying to earn money and look after her daughter and her grandmother at the same time because her grandmother's getting on. I want to say she's been like suspended or something from school, and so her grandmother is teaching her these like really weird life lessons that are so much fun. And just like the way Swiv and her grandmother communicates, it's like they talk a different language to the rest of the world. It's so much fun. All 3 of these characters I cared so much about come the end of the book, and it's such like a tiny little book and it impacted me so much in such a short amount of time. And since finishing it, I can't stop thinking about it. Like, it was the first book that came to mind in answer to this question. I really think this is probably like a new all-time favourite of mine. Link the video where I discussed this, like in my whatever wrap-up I discuss it in. I want to say like maybe March, but I'll link that down below. I ended up like tabbing sections because I loved them so much. I just really enjoyed it. I audiobooked this one as well and the audiobook was incredible. I highly recommend it if it sounds interesting. It's very hot in here. It's like 27 degrees. So if I seem like hot and flustered, that is why I am hot and flustered. Question number 2 is the best sequel you've read thus far. I haven't read many sequels this year. I haven't read many series in general this year. Just haven't read a lot of fantasy. And fantasy and sci-fi are normally like the producers of series. The Neon Gods series I've started, but I don't think that's my answer. I could maybe say Electric Idol, but to be honest, I think my favourite book in the Neon Gods series is Neon Gods. So I don't think any of the sequels to that series are my favourite. And so therefore we're kind of left with the other option. It would have been smart of me to like get the books down ahead of time. And that is the Fractured Fables. That's what this series is called. I'm pretty sure it's just the 2 of them because there's like an edition coming out where it's just the 2 of them. But Amir amended the second one in the series, potentially the last one as well, I suppose. I had so much fun with. I definitely think I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed the first one. This series is kind of like a multiverse but with fairy tales and like really badass characters and like a witty sense of humour. It's a really fun series. I didn't know what to expect going into the first one, and so knowing what to expect going into the second one I think really helped. And also I just loved the character dynamics in this one. It was so much fun. I laughed so much. Yeah, it's a really fun series. It's got a lot of interesting themes in there about like friendship and life expectancy. Our main character Zinnia has a terminal illness. It's just a really solid series, and the second one brought me a lot of joy. Number 3 is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. I really struggled with this one. Most of the anticipated releases I talked about in my anticipated releases video have been overtaken by new releases that were announced later on in the year. So I feel like I should have loads of answers to this question, but I can't remember any of them. Like, I don't know where I've written them down. I don't know how to find these releases that I'm excited about. There's a couple that I pre-ordered that are coming out soon. I know that much. But this is a release you haven't read yet but wanted to. I'm assuming it's like a release that's already out. First one that comes to mind for this, Clytemnestra by Costanza Casati. I love Clytemnestra as a character. I think she's so interesting. I've been excited about this one for a really long time. I have this gorgeous Waterstones edition, and I've like flicked through and I've read the first chapter like a couple times now, and the writing seems really decent. I love how chunky it is. The reason I haven't read it yet is because I read Electra by Jennifer Saint earlier this year, and we have Clytemnestra's story in that. They are going to be very different because that one we also have Cassandra and Electra's story. Excited to read this one so we have like just her story. Like, not that the other one had distractions. I actually really enjoyed Electra by Jennifer Saint. I loved hearing Clytemnestra's story in that, and I also loved Cassandra's story, and I love that book as a general. But I think that's why I haven't gotten to this one yet. Like, I'm not ready for another rendition of Clytemnestra yet. I'm still in my feels about Electra. I'm hoping I get to it this year. I do still want to read it. I am still excited for it. Kind of tempted to say another one. There's another one that I don't even own yet, but it came out recently. I didn't even know it was coming out. And that's Emma Cline's new book. Emma Cline wrote The Girls. It's like a cult book. It's set in the 60s. It's kind of like a play on the Manson. It's basically the Manson story but like fictionalized. I think it's called The Guest. I've just been like highly anticipating Emma Cline's new book for it, like for her to write anything else for ages, so understandably I want to get around to this one. I haven't read Daddy yet either, which is a short story collection, and I really want to. If you've read either The Guest or Daddy, please let me know how they are. Number 4 is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. Again, I feel like I should have lots for this answer because there are lots of releases and books coming out this year that I discovered since my anticipated releases video. But I know my answer for this one, and it's The Temple of Fortunia by Wolf Den trilogy. Is a trilogy set in Pompeii, a little bit before Vesuvius eruption kind of ordeal, so it was when Pompeii's like in its height. We're following Amara, who works in the Wolf Den, aka the Limpara, aka she's a she-wolf or sex worker, a slave by force, and we're just kind of following her and her relationships and like her trying to get out of this situation. I love this trilogy so much. I loved the second one just as much as I loved the first one. They're very different, but they're equally as good and equally as meaty, and just the characters are so nuanced and the relationships are so complicated and real feeling, and they're so immersive. I just feel like I'm in ancient Pompeii, and I cannot wait for the Temple of Fortunia. This one takes place in Rome as well, so that's especially exciting, and I'm going to Rome this summer, and the temple in reference here is actually right outside the hotel that I booked, and that's something that I didn't even know while I was looking at the hotel. I found that out and I was like, it's destiny, I have to book it. So I'm also hoping to go to Pompeii, and like this series has made me like even more excited for all of that. So I cannot wait for it. I cannot wait. I'm so excited. Number 5 is your biggest disappointment. Like, disappointment, I'm interpreting that in like, I thought I was gonna like it and then I didn't like it as much as I anticipated liking it. That's how I'm interpreting it. I'm not like interpreting as like the worst book I've read thus far this year, because it's not by any means the worst book I've read thus far this year. It didn't quite turn out to be what I wanted from it. And that is Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. My relationship with Jennifer Saint's books seems to be somewhat tumultuous. I didn't love Ariadne, I enjoyed it, but I had some problems with it. And then, as we've just mentioned, I loved Electra. I thought it was such a strong book. And then along comes Atalanta, and Atalanta is a character who's not talked about very often. She was one of the Argonauts, like Jason and the Golden Fleece. She was there doing that stuff, but she's often written out of that story. She has a whole host of other myths and stories, and Atalanta translates to equal in strength, the human version of Artemis in a lot of ways. She's a really cool chick. I was so excited to learn more about her and read her story, and I did enjoy that aspect. I learned a lot more about her. I'm so much more intrigued by the Jason and the Argonauts story, the Argonautica, because that's one that I didn't know if I was going to get around to anytime soon, and now like I want to read it. But the writing just reminded me a lot of the writing in Ariadne and all the things I didn't like about the writing in Ariadne. The action scenes for me felt like they went by really quickly, and there's a lot of action in this book. There's not really much action in the other 2 books, and so this was her first time I think dabbling into that. Like within the space of a page, like a battle would come and end. I had a few other picky little things. I still enjoyed it on the whole. I just wasn't as impressed by it as I wanted to be. I'll link the video where I discuss this one down below as well, so you can hear more of my thoughts. It was a bummer. Number 6 is, what's number 6? Your biggest surprise. And for this one, I'm gonna go with Sister Song by Lucy Holland. This is a book that had been sitting on my shelf for a really long time. I bought it the same time I bought Ariadne and The Wolf Den, so whatever year they came out. I feel like they all came out within the same year. I want to say 2021. So it's been sitting on my shelf for a long time, and I've read Ariadne before now, and I'd read The Wolf Den, and this one had just been sitting there alone, feeling very sorry for itself. So it's like, for God's sake, I'm gonna get around to it. Evidently I did. This one takes place like during the Saxon invasion, following 3 siblings. They are children of a king, and Christianity is trying to take over, and there's like warring kingdoms. It's a tumultuous time. Amongst that we have, you know, these 3 young siblings and them trying to come into themselves and discover who they are and what they want to do with their lives, and love and betrayal, blah blah blah. I expected to like it, don't get me wrong. Like, I like that premise, but something about it just made me feel like it's gonna be like, it's fine, I enjoyed it, and then that would be that. But I was so invested while reading this. I loved the world it created. There's magic in here as well, and it just felt so immersive, and I didn't want to leave this like cool old-fashioned fantastical world. I know that the next book Lucy's putting out has very similar vibes to this one, and I cannot wait for it now. And like I never wanted to leave the world. I never wanted the book to end. I just enjoyed it so much, and I think back to it quite a lot now. If it sounds at all interesting, I definitely recommend it. I cannot wait for her next release. So I'm sorry, Sister Song, for doubting you. I also really briefly want to mention another one, Arch Conspirator by Veronica Roth, mostly because I bought this on the biggest whim. I literally saw it on the shelf, saw that it was Veronica Roth, pulled it out, and it had these pretty pages, and then I opened it up, I saw Oedipus and Jocasta and Antigone. I was like, okay, I'm buying it. All of these are Greek myth characters from Oedipus the King. Chronologically is the first in the story. I think Oedipus is a pretty well-known name from the Oedipus complex. That's where Freud got it from. And the myths are also bangers, if I say so. I've only read Oedipus the King and Antigone. I haven't read Oedipus at Colonos, or I feel like I've read one. I had Jocasta in it, like something about supplicants maybe. Anyway, it turned out to be a sci-fi retelling, and I had no idea that's what it was going to be when I went into it, and I ended up really enjoying it. I think it was a really strong book. So it literally was a complete and total surprise. If you've been wondering whether to pick this one up or not, I'll recommend it. Number 7 is a new favourite author. I feel like I have to go with Miriam Toews. There's a lot of authors I've read this year that I've been really impressed by, and I feel like they'll come new author by authors, but I've only read like one of their books. I'm just going off of feelings. I don't actually know yet, whereas I've read 2 Miriam Toews books this year so far. The second one being Women Talking, and I was so impressed by both of these. I enjoyed both of them so much. They're both so clever. Even though this one's like a new favourite, in some ways I prefer Women Talking, like of the 2, which is really bizarre because I don't know if Women Talking is a new favourite necessarily. I don't think about it as much as I think about Fight Night, but I loved everything this stood for and just like the premise of it. I will link the video where I discuss this one down below as well if you want to hear more. I was just so impressed by both of these, and I'm definitely going to read more Miriam Toews. This is the author that I'm the most confident will be a new favourite. Number 8 is your newest fictional crush. And similarly to like your favourite sequel, I haven't read a ton of books this year that are the kind of books where you get crushes. I feel like I've read like a lot of historical fiction and a lot of literary fiction, maybe some like mysteries and some like little pockets of like subgenres like Greek myth retellings and mysteries and erotica, but I haven't read a lot of like rom-coms or like fantasies, and that's typically where I find my fictional crushes, at least majority of the time. In fact, I feel like most of the time it's from fantasy. Honestly, the first character that came to mind when I was like trying to plan out my answers was Amina al-Sirafi from The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, which I finished really recently. The only other answer I think I could possibly give this one to would be the male lead in The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, which I just finished. That's the only like rom-com other than Favorite Half Night Stand I think I've read this year. Oh no, I also read The Dead Romantics this year. So the other option would be, I think his name is Joshua Templeman from The Hating Game. It was alright. I haven't talked about this book on camera yet. When I do talk about it, I will link my thoughts on The Hating Game down below so you can hear more. There were a couple things in the beginning in regards to their relationship, like some moves he made that I was a bit like, I don't know if I feel comfortable with this. This is coming on very strong out of nowhere. Like, is this potentially sexual harassment? Which is not sexy. But on the whole, he was fine. I don't know, maybe it's Amina al-Sirafi, honestly. But I also don't think about fictional crushes I was about to say I don't think about fictional crushes in the way that I used to. I think what happens is I get obsessed, like one or two characters, and then that's it, I'm good. Like, I don't have space in my heart for another fictional crush while there's Asriel in there. That's all I can handle. Okay, so number 9 is your new favourite character, the favourite character that you've discovered this year so far, and I genuinely, I don't know. There's so many that I like really enjoyed, but none of them were necessarily like standouts. I mean, I guess we could throw in Amina al-Sirafi as an option. That's what I have in my notes. I wrote Amina al-Sirafi, I guess, question mark. Geeta from the Bandit Queens. Who was Geeta's friend? It began with an S. Salome, oh for God's sake. Salome. I really enjoyed Salome as well. Geeta and Salome from the Bandit Queens. So much fun. This was a book that I read this year as well. Obviously that's why I'm talking about it now. I really enjoyed it. And the characters, oh, they were so good. They were so good. I mean, we could also say the grandma from Fight Night. She was fantastic. What was her name? Grandma, I want to say it was like Grandma Moira or something. She was fantastic. I feel like it might be Geeta and Salome from the Bandit Queens. Yeah, I'm gonna give it to them. I can't pick one. It's a tie. They come as a pair. Number 10, a book that made you cry. Which one? I've teared up while reading quite a few books. There's like 3 or 4 books that come to mind, the ones that made me cry the hardest. I'll go with... okay, let's talk about this one here. The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. This is like one of the first books I read this year. I also really enjoyed this one. If you couldn't tell, this is like another contender that might be in your favourite. Emma Donoghue is definitely one of my favourite authors, and this book confirmed that for me. What was I saying? Cry. I cried a lot at the end of this book. I think I teared up multiple times throughout it, and then, oh, look at how floppy it is. That's lovely. Getting so distracted talking about everything but I don't. Spoilers. So we're following an English nurse. She gets sent to this incredibly rural, it's not a town, village, Irish village, impoverished Irish village. She's sent to watch 11-year-old Anna, who doesn't eat. She's not eaten anything for like 3 or 4 months, and yet she hasn't died. She doesn't look like she's gonna die anytime soon. What the hell's going on? So she's sent to watch her to try and figure out, not necessarily to try and figure out what's going on, but just to like observe if she's in fact eating or not, to prove if she's a miracle or not, essentially. But then obviously she takes it upon herself to like try and figure out what the hell's going on. It's like a psychological thriller. Stephen King said it's impossible to put down, and I have to agree. And it was so thought-provoking and fascinating, and I got really invested in the characters and the relationships in here. I cried at the end. Number 11 is a book that made you happy, and I would be remiss if I said anything other than Legends and Lattes, which I read at the very beginning of this year, and it's the most happy making book. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. It's a cozy fantasy. A orc decides to give up her adventuring and open a coffee shop. Stakes are very low. It's very comforting. It's just very happy making. I read like a couple other cozy fantasies this year that were also very happy making. The Hobbit is like technically high fantasy, but it feels like a cozy fantasy. I think it's because it's children's. Like the stakes, you know it's going to be okay in the end. Very comforting, nostalgic feeling to it. I listened to the audiobook of The Hobbit by Andy Serkis, and he did such a fantastic rendition. It made me so happy. Number 12 is the most beautiful book you've bought or received so far this year. I've not actually showed you this book yet, despite talking about it. Let's show it to you. And that is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. Remember this one that I just mentioned loads without ever showing you the book? Look at that. And the spine is stunning on the shelf. I love the way that it like ties in like the crab down here and the birds and the fishes and the oceans, but like all this gold inlay is just stunning. Look at that. We have a lovely colourful map in there, and then we have like the US cover in here. Gorgeous. It's gorgeous. So I've not actually given you a synopsis for this one yet, despite talking about it several times. We're following pirates. I love pirate stories. I've read so few pirate stories. I love them every time I do. Pirates of the Caribbean are some of my other favourite films. I need to read more pirate books. If you have any pirate book recommendations or anything pirate related recommendations, please let me know in the comments. I love pirates. So Amina al-Sirafi is this famed pirate, and she's offered a job no bandit can refuse, and she jumps at the chance for one final adventure with her old crew that will make her a legend and offers a fortune she will secure in her family's future forever. And it's the first in a series, and I cannot wait to read rest of the series. You know a cover's good when you can't wait to see what the rest of the covers in this series, or the rest of the covers like by that author, are gonna look like. Well, like, I get really excited for Jennifer Saint's cover releases because they're all so stunning. It's a good sign. And I cannot wait to see what the rest of these covers are gonna look like. And we have one last question. I can stop melting soon. Number 13 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? I thought it'd be fun to kind of check in with the list I talked about in my anticipated releases, like / books I want to read this year video, and like see how many of those I've actually read. I'm gonna link that video down below as well because I mentioned it so much in this video. I've like in my mind compartmentalized into like 3 sections, and I've done really well in one section and I've not touched the other 2. So one of them is like my Greek myth retelling section of books that I talked about. There was 4: A Thousand Ships, Electra, Sister Song, and Stone Blind. Spoiler alert, I've already read Electra and Sister Song, and I have also read Stone Blind, so the only one on that list I haven't yet read is A Thousand Ships. I feel pretty confident that I can get to that by the end of the year. There was also a list of sequels that I've owned that I haven't read yet, of which I've read none of them. The Atlas Paradox, Defy the Night, The Ask and the Answer, and The Eye and the Door. The Atlas Paradox is the second book in the Atlas 6 trilogy. I feel pretty confident I can get to that one this year because I want to reread the Atlas 6 and then read the Atlas Paradox in preparation for the 3rd book coming out in January. Defy the Night is the sequel to... Defy the Night's the first book, isn't it? Yeah, Defy the Night is the first book. Defend the Dawn is the sequel. And the 3rd book in that trilogy is also coming out this year, so I'm thinking I might just marathon Defend the Dawn and the last book. So I feel pretty confident about that one. The Ask and the Answer is the 2nd book in the Chaos Walking trilogy. The Eye and the Door is the 2nd book in the Regeneration trilogy. I don't know if I'm going to get around to those 2, honestly. And then lastly are like just like books that I want to get around to this year. One of them is Children of Dune, the 3rd book in the Dune series. I feel confident I can get to that one. I normally read them in like July or August, and so if like come the beginning of August I haven't read Children of Dune yet, like that would just shoot up in my priority list. The Power of the Orange Tree, this is like the big one in terms of like I want to read that this year, because if I don't it will end up sitting on my shelf for ages, and like the last few years I've been getting through books I've been sitting on my shelf for ages that I feel really guilty about. Things like The Starless Sea and The Strange Tumor Duology. Power of the Orange Tree is in that category. I got it last year. I don't want it sitting around. I want to read it this year. This is like my biggest... I want to read that one this year. So that's like the real answer for this question. What book do I need to read by the end of the year? The Power of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Yeah, and that was all of the questions. This was fun. This was a fun check-in. I think my conclusion of this is I've had a really fantastic year so far. I feel like definitely better than I have the last 2 times I filmed this video, so I'm looking forward to the rest of the year. Please let me know what your most anticipated book that you want to get to by the end of the year is down below. Let me know how your reading's going so far this year. And yeah, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!